Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Lin Li needed to use the Branch of Eternity to revive the Seed of Eternity, yet the Branch of Eternity was why Nifa was trapped here. If Garesko had designed everything here, then it was necessary for Lin Li to consider Ragi's opinion now if he wanted to get the Branch of Eternity. Also, Lin Li was embarrassed to ask for it directly. Now, he needed to figure out how important the Branch of Eternity was to this place. If it was really irreplaceable, then he wouldn't stand any chance. That little black dragon. At the end of the Dark Age, he proclaimed himself the new Dragon of Destruction, but was defeated by Garesko. Garesko wanted to kill him directly, but he had a good brother, who pleaded for his life in front of Garesko. So, Garesko changed his mind, and trapped him in this world using this method. Obviously, Rog didn't know Lin Li's urgent desire for the Branch of Eternity, and thought that he was just curious. Lin Li thought, so that's the truth. That Nifa thought too highly of himself. He survived because Tutankhamun pleaded for his life. But he told me that Garesko tricked him into coming here. Lin Li found it funny, but another question came up in his mind next. Wasn't it the Immortal King, who didn't want Nifa becoming the new Dragon of Destruction? Why did Garesko do something that the Immortal King would do? In the historical documents and various myths about the Dark Age, there wasn't any mention of Nifa at all. This meant that Nifa probably didn't cause any trouble for the rebellion forces when the human coalition was fighting against the High Elves. In that case, the chief of the coalition, Garesko, wouldn't need to deal with Nifa, not to mention killing him. If there was anything that could make Garesko strike, it would be the fact that Nifa wanted to become the next Dragon of Destruction. Although the Immortal King had disappeared, the one who inherited his legacy should be his proud disciple Osric. How could it be Garesko? Lin Li suddenly remembered an incident back at the Scar of Death, when he was fighting for the debris of the stars. He had seen a diary which belonged to a royal high elf. In the last part of the diary, the high elf wrote sentences like, "He's not Garesko, he's the Immortal King," with ecstasy. Could it be that the two most powerful beings to have ever existed in Anril, Garesko and the Immortal King, had some connection that nobody knew? Lin Li didn't ask Rog about this. No matter what connection Garesko and the Immortal King had, it wasn't something for him to worry about now. He nodded and continued to ask Rog about Nifa. I see, but wasn't Garesko afraid that somebody would release Nifa from this world after he left? If not for you, I would have believed Nifa, and he would have gotten his freedom now. That was the question that puzzled Lin Li. Not mentioning the relationship between Garesko and the Immortal King, it turned out that Garesko also didn't want Nifa to become the Dragon of Destruction. The simplest method to achieve that was undoubtedly killing him. Garesko had already prepared to do that. But how could he give up such a good chance to end all worries just because of Tutankhamun's plea, and choose to confine Nifa in such a troublesome way? It was like turning a death penalty into life imprisonment. Anything was possible as long as Nifa was alive. Lin Li didn't think Nifa would have requested him to take the Branch of Eternity. If he had known Lin Li would meet Rog here, nobody would be foolish enough to deceive a person who would meet someone who could easily expose his lies. Evidently, Nifa was quite confident that the two of them wouldn't meet. However, Nifa's plan failed due to some unknown reason. If not, Lin Li would have gotten the Branch of Eternity and broken Garesko's seal already. Rog patiently explained to Lin Li, even if he can leave this place, he won't dare to go back to Anril. Although Garesko had spared his life due to Tutankhamun's plea, he had also made Tutankhamun promise that he would personally kill Nifa should the latter come back to Anril. Although Tutankhamun's power is a bit lower than that of his brother, Garesko taught him some tricks that can guarantee him to keep his promise. No wonder. Lin Li had also speculated that since Tutankhamun and Nifa were hatched from the same magical crystal, their strength should be similar. Since Tutankhamun was guarding the Blackstone Mountains now, he surely had some way to control Nifa. However, Lin Li had thought that Tutankhamun had learnt the method of controlling Nifa from the Immortal King. It turned out that Garesko was the one who taught him that in order to fulfill his promise. As for you meeting me here, that's an accident that little black dragon didn't think of. He probably knew that I will be in deep sleep now, so he asked you to get the Branch of Eternity from here. However, I felt extremely pure dark force in my sleep. I thought that the Lord of Darkness has arrived, so I woke up earlier. With that, Rog peered at Lin Li with complicated feelings. Lin Li knew that the pure dark force Rog talked about was the energy released from Gloomy Dark, when he was battling the Fire Phoenix. Seeing Rog looking at him, with a strange expression, Lin Li felt very pressured. Although this High Priest of Darkness didn't point it out directly like Sendros, his glance seemed to be suggesting that he took Lin Li as the incarnation of darkness. Lin Li didn't dare continue this topic. Hearing that Rog had finally mentioned the Branch of Eternity, he curiously asked, "High Priest, Is the branch of eternity really so powerful? It maintains the state where two worlds overlap. I'm lucky to meet you here. If I'd really taken it away easily, I would have fallen into Nifa's trap. That little black dragon didn't deceive you on this point. These two worlds overlap because of this branch of eternity. Although the overlapping space won't recover immediately once you take the branch of eternity away, the process is almost irreversible. Even if you wanted to put the branch back, you wouldn't be able to do it. At least not with your current power. Moreover, Nifa probably didn't tell you. If you took the branch of eternity in my sleep, most of the energy in this fire element world would explode. Being the center of this explosion, I would lose consciousness and sink into endless bloody slaughter. Rog revealed another shocking piece of information using a calm voice. Although Rog sounded very calm as if talking about someone else, Lin Li broke out in a cold sweat upon hearing it. If Rog really became a fire monster that only knew how to kill, then he would be the first to face it. After all, Rog had been a sanctuary realm arbitrator at the Supreme Council. If that really happened, none of his tricks would be sufficient to save Lin Li from death under Rog's hands. Thinking of this, Lin Li shuddered. He would be more than happy to skin that wretched Nifa alive now. After almost being tricked by Nifa, Lin Li naturally wouldn't help him break the seal. He told himself that he would rather not obtain the branch of eternity than let that lad escape the torture of the seal. After all, High Priest Rog told him he had a way to transport Lin Li back to Anril. It was better to understand more about the Dark Age from Rog now. If not, his trip would be wasted. In the blink of an eye, 1,000+ years have passed since I came here. I don't know how's the outside world now. How's the Darkness Shrine? After Rog had told Lin Li some happenings during the Dark Age, he started to inquire Lin Li about the outside world now. As he was the first High Priest of the Darkness Shrine, Rog's concern about the Darkness Shrine didn't fade with time. Anril is rather peaceful now. Although the kingdoms clash frequently, there's no proper war. But the Darkness Shrine. Speaking of the Darkness Shrine, Lin Li eyed Rog cautiously, and continued. The Darkness Shrine has been weakened quite a bit these years, and can no longer match the Brilliant Shrine, especially after it experienced a catastrophe about 600 years after you've left. The prehistoric magical beasts from this world arrived at the Darkness Shrine through the crack in the Eternal Darkness altar. They caused severe damage to the shrine and almost destroyed it. Oh, Nifa did that when I was asleep the previous time. He wanted to threaten me with that to help him get the branch of eternity. However, that's all he could do. After all, he certainly couldn't release energy from the fire element world for a prolonged period of time. Rog didn't seem to mind this heavy blow to the Darkness Shrine. If others saw Rog's reaction now, they would probably think that this high priest didn't have feelings for the Darkness Shrine anymore. However, Lin Li knew that Rog wasn't being cold and emotionless, but had much more important tasks here, and had strong faith in the Darkness Shrine. The chief high priest of the Darkness Shrine now is Master Sendros, who's also a very admirable elder. Under his lead, the Darkness Shrine has recovered quite a bit. However, Master Sendros sensed some abnormality at the Eternal Darkness altar recently. He thinks that the catastrophe in the past may occur again, so he is rather worried. Lin Li continued to introduce the situation of the Darkness Shrine now. Although he had just entered the Darkness Shrine not too long ago, Sendros had already considered him the incarnation of darkness, so he didn't treat Lin Li as an outsider. Because of that, Lin Li knew quite a lot about the Darkness Shrine. Rog nodded. He was very satisfied with Sendros as his successor. However, he frowned upon hearing Lin Li mention the other high priest in the Darkness Council, and asked, "Aren't you a member of the Darkness Shrine?" "Fulik. I manage a small guild of magic in the Breezy Plains. Master Sendros invited me to the Darkness Shrine as a guest during this period, and I encountered this situation." Lin Li wasn't being humble. Although the Tower of Dusk was developing pretty well now, it was still merely a small guild of magic, compared to the Darkness Shrine. He didn't mention that Sendros had invited him because of this incident, and reversed the cause-effect order. If not, he'd have to explain about the matter regarding the incarnation of darkness. No wonder. With your abilities, you could definitely enter the Darkness Council if you were in the Darkness Shrine. Are Apophis and the Supreme Council blind without Garesco? How can they just let you be the president of a small guild of magic? If Garesco knew about this, he'd probably be angry to death. Evidently, Rog attributed Lin Li's position as the president of a guild of magic to the misjudgment of the Supreme Council. He wasn't at all polite to scold all the arbitrators in the Supreme Council, including Apophis. In Anril now, given that Garesco was nowhere to be found, perhaps Rog was the only one who had the right to scold Apophis. Apophis was so unjustly scolded. Lin Li silently wiped his sweat, and could only apologize to Apophis in his heart. "Fulik, why don't you come to the Darkness Shrine? I will give you a token, and you can pass the token to Sendros when you go back." I believe that you'll definitely be able to secure a place in the Darkness Shrine given your abilities. As someone who valued talent, Rog wanted to recruit this young genius mage for the Darkness Shrine given the fact that its recent developments were not so good. Actually, there was nothing wrong with Rog's thoughts. After all, other than President Aldwin of the Alana Guild of Magic, other presidents seldom reached legendary level. President Jarian of the Jarosis Guild of Magic was only level 15 when he first became president. The presidents from the guilds of magic of other countries were also only level 17 or 18. On the other hand, Lin Li was a legendary mage at the peak of level 23. It was really a waste of talent for him to be the president of a guild of magic. Obviously, Lin Li couldn't boast that his Tower of Dusk would surpass the Darkness Shrine sooner or later in front of Rog. He could only give excuses such as he didn't have the aspiration and was already very content with his current status. Rog could naturally sense Lin Li's reluctance and didn't speak of joining the Darkness Shrine anymore. After giving Lin Li a long look, he moved on to another topic. After some conversation, Lin Li understood more about incidents that had happened during the Dark Age. He also told Rog briefly about the current situation in Anril. By then, Lin Li felt it was about time for him to leave since he could neither teach Nifa a lesson nor obtain the Branch of Eternity. Moreover, the catastrophe at the Darkness Shrine last time was because Rog had been asleep. Now that High Priest Rog was awakened, the catastrophe probably wouldn't occur again. High Priest, I'm honored to discuss so many questions with you. However, Master Sendros is probably very anxious now given that I have come in for so long. Do you have any word for me to bring back for the Darkness Shrine? Asked Lin Li respectfully. Rog contemplated for a moment and replied, I indeed have a favor to ask. Please, I will do whatever I can to help you. Lin Li didn't hesitate to reply, not only because he needed Rog's help to go back, but also out of respect for this high priest. Moreover, he believed that Rog wouldn't request him to do something above his capabilities. Thus, he was very happy to do something for this admirable elder. Rog nodded and said, It's not a difficult task. I hope that you can go back to the mountaintop and tell that little black dragon that I can give him the Branch of Eternity. However, he has to come down to help me with something first. What? Give him the Branch of Eternity, won't he? Lin Li was shocked at Rog's words, but given that there was still Tutankhamun outside, Nifa probably wouldn't enjoy any real freedom even if he was out. At least he wouldn't dare to step onto the grounds of Anril. There was still another question that Lin Li couldn't figure out, so he asked Rog, doesn't Nifa need to suppress the strength of this fire element world at the mountaintop? He probably won't be able to come down to see you. Rog smiled and asserted, no worries. I can help him suppress that strength. You just need to bring my words to him. I'm sure he won't reject it. Lin Li nodded and replied, okay, I'll bring your words to him. Although he really wanted the Branch of Eternity, what Rog wanted to do wasn't something he could help with given his current abilities. As for the branch, it was good enough knowing who it was with now. Given the speed of his improvement now, it wasn't impossible for him to snatch the branch from Nifa when his power was good enough. After a temporary goodbye with Rog, Lin Li immediately headed back to the top of the volcano. He had wasted some time when he first entered this world to harvest its valuable materials, so he didn't need to waste any time on the way back. Lin Li used the power of flight directly and shot towards the mountaintop like a flash of lightning. After just a moment of time, he had reached the peak. What did that human mage do? Why is Rog awake now? Nifa felt very uneasy because he could sense Rog's aura from here. This meant that Rog had already been awakened from his deep slumber, which was something Nifa hadn't expected at all. Although the ever-tormenting power had suddenly disappeared just now, Nifa wasn't at all relieved. He racked his brains, trying to figure out what happened down below. Just then, Lin Li passed the prehistoric magical beast directly from the top and landed in front of Nifa. As Nifa had tried to set him up, Lin Li didn't have any positive feelings towards Nifa. However, he suppressed his resentment since Rog had asked for Nifa's help. Lin Li glared at him and said, you must be really disappointed that I came back here alive. Ha! It's not like that. Did you meet Rog below? Nifa knew that Rog had revealed all his tricks, so he didn't know how to reply to Lin Li at this moment, and could only change the topic. You should be very clear what I mean. Lin Li struggled to stop himself from skinning this dragon, and sneered, High Priest Rog wants to see you. If you want to obtain the Branch of Eternity, follow me to the foot of the mountain now. Nifa's eyelids twitched. From Lin Li's words, he knew that the tormenting power suddenly disappeared because of Rog. Rog's abilities must have improved considerably during his slumber. Although that confining power had disappeared, Nifa knew that he was still not free. Other than the fact that he didn't have to endure the tortures of this fire element world's power, The circumstances he was in now were no different from before. Okay. Nifa nodded unwillingly. Although he knew that Rog wouldn't call him for anything good, he had no other choice. Where else could he go? His good brother was still waiting to kill him in Anril, while this fire element world was totally a forbidden zone for him. Seeing that Nifa had agreed, Lin Li didn't wait for him, and directly flew downhill. Nifa looked around, thought for a moment, and followed Lin Li with a bitter smile on his face. Although Nifa didn't want to work for Rog, the enticement of the branch of eternity was too strong. Even though he had told Lin Li that he could take the branch away, Lin Li would never be able to get the branch even if that plan was successful. The two soon reached the foot of the volcano. Rog stood there waiting for them, his body burning in flames. Originally, Nifa had thought little of Lin Li's abilities. After all, a level 23 legendary mage was just a bigger ant to a sanctuary realm powerhouse. However, after this flight, Nifa was shocked to realize that he couldn't even catch up with this human mage, using power of flight even though he was a wyrm, and flying was instinctive for him. Obviously, Nifa wouldn't know that Lin Li could use the levitation spell like the power of flight back, when he had been just an archmage. After stepping into the legendary realm, he put in immense effort to practice his power of flight. Not to mention power, there were less than 10 people in Anril who could catch up with Lin Li. Although Lin Li often seemed like he would confront all obstacles with bravery, he didn't slack at all in terms of obtaining skills that allowed him to retreat fast when his life was threatened. Old Rog, do you want me to do something for you when you say that you'll give the branch of eternity to me? Nifa landed on a spot opposite Rog, which he personally thought was safe. After all, he was wary of this dark mage, who had been his neighbor for hundreds of years. Right. I need you to collaborate with me for something. Once it's done, I can give you the branch of eternity. Rog wasn't bothered by Nifa's rude tone, and directly stated his demand. Collaborate? What kind of task can't you accomplish yourself, and need my help with? Nifa looked alarmed. No one was clearer about Rog's abilities than Nifa, especially after Rog had transformed into his current state. When Rog needed to collaborate with others even with such terrifying abilities, it definitely wouldn't be a simple task. Rog stared at Nifa and replied, "It's all because of you." Because of me? What a joke. Nifa looked like he was laughing, but his eyes were still filled with wariness. He said, "I've always been tormented by the seal at the mountaintop. If anything, Geresko is to blame." Rog wasn't angered by Nifa's attitude. He calmly explained, "Because you've released the power of this fire element world several times, the seal was damaged, and the space-time rift in the outside world has started to expand. Thus, this dimension that existed in the crack has also become unstable. I've already sensed that a terrifying presence will be awakened soon in the fire element world. If he is awakened, the balance of elemental power in the whole world will be destroyed. You should know what catastrophe that will cause. You're worried about the Darkness Shrine, aren't you? I thought that you don't care about it anymore. Although the Darkness Shrine would feel the impact first should anything happen in this dimension, what does it have to do with me?" Nifa pretended to be lighthearted, but he was rather worried internally since Rog wasn't someone who liked to exaggerate. "Don't forget that the first to feel the impact isn't the Darkness Shrine, but you and me." Rog hit the nail on the head. No matter what would happen to the Darkness Shrine, Nifa and he wouldn't be able to escape, since they were in this dimension. As such, Nifa had to do this, whether he was willing or not. Never mind. Tell me what you want to do." Nifa knew that Rog was telling the truth. After all, the most likely outcome of the loss of balance of elemental power was the collapse of this world. Even though he was the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction, he most likely wouldn't be able to make it out alive. "I believe you've heard of the ancient flame dragon called Lothar who sleeps in this fire element world. After my slumber this time, I can clearly feel that he's going to awake soon." Even with Rog's composure, his tone was filled with worry when he announced this piece of information. Upon hearing this piece of news, Nifa jumped without letting Rog finish his sentence, and yelled, "Impossible. So you want me to deal with Lothar together with you? Don't you know how powerful Lothar is? Even my father couldn't defeat Lothar easily, and he has similar power compared to the dragon aspects. No, I would rather face my brother in the outside world than follow you on a crazy quest. I advise you to leave here and bring your Darkness Shrine as far as possible. Our strength is nothing compared to Lothar's." When Rog asked Lin Li to look for Nifa, Lin Li knew that what Rog wanted to do was not so simple. However, he didn't expect Rog to be dealing with an ancient flame dragon. After hearing Nifa's words, Lin Li had some understanding of the ancient flame dragon Lothar's level of power. Given the fact that his nearly matched that of the dragon aspects, to tank him in probably was also no match for him. This was really something Lin Li couldn't help with at all. Even if he put out all his trump cards, it would also be impossible for him to hurt Lothar a single bit. It was just too crazy to combat an ancient flame dragon. Honestly speaking, even Lin Li agreed with Nifa now. Everyone should just avoid Lothar as far as possible, no matter what would happen when the flame dragon got into Anril. At least the sanctuary powerhouses wouldn't just sit back and do nothing. Then, the sanctuary powerhouses would probably defeat the flame dragon together. Although Nifa outright rejected Rog's offer, Rog didn't give up, and unhurriedly said, "As the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction who vowed to become the new Dragon of Destruction, you are scared so easily. Flame Dragon Lothar is indeed very powerful, but we have a chance if we collaborate. The branch of eternity that you desire is just here. As long as you agree to collaborate, it's yours after everything is done." Nifa looked at the shade of green in this crimson-colored world, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. He shook his head and replied, "Although I really want this branch, my life is still more important. Flame Dragon Lothar is a lunatic that we definitely can't defeat. I won't go crazy with you. Do you think you have a choice? At least you still stand a chance facing Lothar. But do you think the skills Geresko has taught Tutankhamun are useless? You are very clear of Tutankhamun's personality. Although you two are biological brothers, and he pleaded for your life in front of Geresko, he will definitely keep his promise that he has made to Geresko. Do you want to die in your own brother's hands, or fight for your chance of survival against Lothar?" Rog's words were rather cruel, but it was the truth that Nifa had to admit. Although Nifa was a bit stronger than Tutankhamun, Tutankhamun had learned skills that specifically countered Nifa from Geresko. Unless Nifa became the new Dragon of Destruction, he would be defeated no matter how much stronger he was compared to Tutankhamun. Moreover, with the special telepathic connection between the brothers, he wouldn't be able to escape from Tutankhamun once he stepped into Anril no matter where he hid. That stubborn brother of his wouldn't let him off so easily even if he cared about him. Fight for survival. It's easier said than done. That's Flame Dragon Lothar. Nifa felt extremely conflicted now. He was doomed to die no matter what he chose. It was just a matter of how he'd die. Damn it. If not for Geresko, I wouldn't have to deal with all this unlucky stuff. Rog noticed Nifa's internal conflict, and put another important chip on the table. He said, "If you agree to deal with Flame Dragon Lothar together with me, other than the Branch of Eternity, I can help you find the power that your father had left behind at the suitable moment." This was definitely a greater enticement to Nifa than the Branch of Eternity. After all, Nifa's ultimate goal was to become the new Dragon of Destruction. However, Nifa still scoffed at Rog's offer, and remarked with contempt, "Old Rog, who are you trying to bluff? Everyone knows that my father's power completely disappeared after he was killed by the Immortal King. Even if you want to bluff me, at least come up with a better lie. Do I look like a fool to you? It's normal that you don't believe me, but I'm speaking the truth." Rog only unbotheredly smiled at Nifa's mockery, and continued, "Other than the two of them, the only one who knows the real situation back then is me because I personally witnessed that battle. You must think that I'm lying now, but if you continue to listen, I can tell you some things, and you can judge whether my words are true or not." Nifa scornfully replied, "Right. Go ahead. I want to hear what other nonsense you can think of." He didn't at all believe that Rog knew what happened during that battle. Rog wasn't bothered by Nifa's attitude at all. He contemplated for a moment, and continued, "Let me just tell you some essential facts. The most powerful magic that your father, the Dragon of Destruction, had used during that battle was his affinity spell, Doom. The Immortal King lost an arm as a result. The Immortal King used a crossbow with mysterious power during that battle. When he gave the Dragon of Destruction the fatal blow, he used an arrow that could manipulate the rules of space and time." Nifa was full of contempt as first, but his expression turned solemn with every piece of evidence Rog listed out. In the end, his whole body was tense. There were no written records about the battle between the Immortal King and Dragon of Destruction. Although there were the stories and legends, anyone who knew the slightest common sense would know how untrue the legends were. Nifa, the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction and foster son of the Immortal King, all the more wouldn't believe the legends. However, the things Rog had said were all very reasonable. With Nifa's understanding of his foster father the Immortal King, and the information he had inherited from the Dragon of Destruction, he could conclude that Rog wasn't lying. Now you should know if what I'm saying is true. I can also promise you that you will only be playing the role of holding Lothar back. When we collaborate, you won't be the main fighting force. If we meet any danger, you can immediately escape, and don't have to fight till death with me." Rog knew that Nifa was moved, so he gave him the last push, and didn't say anything more after that, letting Nifa make the decision himself. Should he give it a shot? After all, becoming the Dragon of Destruction was his ultimate goal. However, his opponent was Flame Dragon Lothar, the strongest wyrm below the dragon aspects. As someone who wanted to become the Dragon of Destruction, didn't he even have this bit of courage? However, Being courageous didn't mean to kill himself. The difference in abilities was just too great, and he had no chance against Flame Dragon Lothar. Nifa was struggling to make the decision, just as if there were two voices in his heart, fighting with each other on what to choose. After a long time, Nifa stopped struggling and gritted his teeth. He said to Rog, "Okay, I agree as you wish. However, I hope that you won't forget your promise. If I sense danger, I will leave immediately. I would rather die into Tankhaman's hands than be burned to ashes by that lunatic Lothar." Although Rog was very confident that Nifa would be tempted by the conditions he put out, anything could happen until it was confirmed. Seeing that Nifa finally agreed, Rog heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and said, "Then let's discuss how to deal with Flame Dragon Lothar now. What do you know about that battle?" Nifa didn't pick up Rog's topic, and asked Rog anxiously about what had happened during the battle between the Immortal King and Dragon of Destruction. "I will tell you what you want to know after we are finished with what we want to do now," Rog replied without any hesitation, sealing off the topic with just one sentence. Now, he wasn't worried that Nifa would leave at all. That wasn't because he trusted Nifa's sense of integrity, but rather because he was confident in Nifa's desire to become the Dragon of Destruction. Nifa was indeed angry that Rog sealed off the topic just like that, but thinking that Rog had information that he needed urgently, he had to suppress his anger, and stiffly continued, "Okay, tell me what you plan to do." "Not me, but us," Rog emphasized, and turned towards Lin Li. "Flick, can you fetch the Branch of Eternity for me now?" "Glad to help you," replied Lin Li courteously. He then turned and flew towards the shade of green in this crimson-colored world. Although he wanted to get this Branch of Eternity as well, he knew that it had more important use now. At least, it could help Rog to get Nifa as a temporary ally. Rog could have left the Night Canyon with the Darkness Shrine. Although Flame Dragon Lothar would cause a catastrophe should it be led into Anril, no one would blame Rog for that. Moreover, the catastrophe wouldn't be blown out of proportions when the Sanctuary powerhouses joined against it. This was certainly a more advantageous and safer choice for Rog. However, he chose the more difficult path to stop Flame Dragon Lothar here. This was why Lin Li sincerely admired Rog. If he was Rob, would he make the same choice? Lin Li shook his head. Not to mention that he didn't consider himself as someone belonging to Anril, even in his original world. He probably wouldn't risk his own life to save others. He would help with some things within his capacity at the very most. Due to the strong pressure after Rog awoke, the fire elemental creatures in this fire element world all ran far away from here. Thus, Lin Li got to the location of the Branch of Eternity without any hindrance. Soon, the greenery amongst the red began to get clearer, and Lin Li finally saw the branch that was being shrouded in a faint green-colored luster. It was a branch that was roughly the length of a human arm, and about only 2 fingers thick. There were several smaller branches at the top, with 7 fresh green leaves growing on the branch. It was full of life, and anyone would be able to sense the intense vitality in it with just one glance. Lin Li walked towards the branch of the Tree of Eternity, and stopped to take a deep breath. He could not detect the hot flames at all, and he instead felt a wave of fresh and natural scent that wafted up to his nose and spread to his lungs. After just one deep breath, Lin Li felt as if his body had been cleansed inside out. Every pore of his seemed to have been refreshed. That was a feeling that Lin Li had never experienced with the Tree of Eternity. Clearly, the branch of the Tree of Eternity was full of vitality, just like he had expected. Unfortunately, the branch of the Tree of Eternity did not belong to him, and he couldn't use it to revive the Seed of Eternity. Lin Li sighed secretly, and calmed himself down before observing the branch of the Tree of Eternity carefully again. Lin Li had never seen the real Tree of Eternity, which was cared for by the High Elves who were perfectionists, and he had no idea how beautiful it was back then. Staring at the branch of the Tree of Eternity in front of him now, he felt like it was the most indisputably perfect work of art in the world, even though it was only an insignificant branch. The branch of the Tree of Eternity was green like emerald, and it was also exuding a faint green glow, with no spots or flaws at all. The entire branch was smooth, and felt a little crystal clear. However, layers of cloud-shaped patterns could be seen on the branch through the faint green glow, making it look even more mysterious. The smaller branches were evenly distributed around the main branch, with an appropriate distance between each other. A slight shift would seem absurd, and the entire arrangement was extremely pleasing to the eye. There were 7 tender green leaves scattered on the twigs, continuously exuding fresh and intense vitality. At this moment, Lin Li did not even dare to reach out, fearing that a slight touch would damage the beautiful piece of art. After a long time, Lin Li finally snapped out of his trance, and stopped being mesmerized by the beautiful artwork. Instead, he grabbed the branch of the Tree of Eternity relentlessly, and turned around to fly towards Rog without admiring it further. You took such a long time to collect a branch. I really don't know how you obtained the power that you have now, Nifa grumbled in dissatisfaction. In fact, he was purely just expressing his displeasure with Rog. Lin Li ignored Nifa, and simply handed the branch of the Tree of Eternity to Rog respectfully. Of course, he had secretly decided to snatch the branch of the Tree of Eternity back from Nifa after Rog handed it to Nifa. Okay, Fulik, it's time to talk about our matters next. After the battle begins, you have to be more careful. I may not have the energy to take care of you anymore, Rog said to Lin Li concernedly after he grabbed the branch of the Tree of Eternity. Don't worry, High Priest, I'll pay attention to it, Lin Li said with a nod. He actually didn't feel that Rog's words had hurt his self-esteem. After all, with Lin Li's current abilities, he couldn't stand strong in such a high-level battle, even though he had a certain status in Anril. It would be an impressive feat for him not to become Rog's burden. Rog held onto the branch of the Tree of Eternity, and did not immediately give it to Nifa. Instead, he walked to the passage to the fire elemental world, and placed it on the ground gently. Lin Li found it to be a little strange at first, but when he saw that Nifa was remaining silent, he immediately understood that the two of them should have had a discussion when he was collecting the branch of the Tree of Eternity. Although Lin Li wasn't informed, he didn't find there to be anything wrong with it, because he saw himself as an insignificant figure in the battle. Hence, he felt that it would be fine for him not to know about some things. However, Rog clearly did not forget about Lin Li. After putting the branch of the Tree of Eternity away, he stood up, but did not turn around. Instead, he said to Lin Li, "Mine and Nifa's powers alone are not enough for us to fight the Flame Dragon Lothar. Hence, we'll need the help of the branch of the Tree of Eternity. After the Flame Dragon Lothar enters this world, I hope we'll be able to suppress his power." Lin Li suddenly realized that Rog simply wanted to set a trap using the branch of the Tree of Eternity. After all, the Flame Dragon Lothar's fire elemental power was a little destructive in nature, and using the power of the branch of the Tree of Eternity would provide some restrictive effects. However, regardless of the effects, they could only pin some hope on it. Like Rog mentioned, no one could control it to make it come true. After explaining it to Lin Li, Rog remained silent, and stood near the branch of the Tree of Eternity where he extended his arms, and began chanting a long spell, which didn't sound like a language that Lin Li recognized. However, he felt a strange sense of familiarity. Lin Li couldn't understand the meaning of the characters that made up the spell, but he could clearly sense the pure and immense divine power in every word that Rog chanted. Lin Li suddenly thought about the holy light magic that he had learned from Rosario at the Brilliance Shrine, only to realize that the spell Rog was chanting seemed to be rather similar to the prayer Rosario chanted when he performed the holy light magic. It was no wonder he found it familiar. Despite having discovered the reason for the sense of familiarity that he felt, Lin Li got even more curious. Rog was the first high priest of the Darkness Shrine, and he definitely had unparalleled accomplishments in dark magic. However, his ability to make the dark force contain pure light attribute was indeed a little incredible. Although Lin Li also knew that the relationship between the Brilliance Shrine and the Darkness Shrine was not as hostile as most people thought, he also realized that light and darkness were interdependent. Light would make darkness more intense, while darkness would allow light to look even brighter. However, darkness was still darkness, and light was light. Even though Lin Li had created the light and darkness domain, the two powers were still distinct and separate. Why did Rog allow the dark force to contain the attributes of light? At this moment, Rog had already stopped chanting. He seemed to have sensed Lin Li's confusion. Although the battle was about to begin soon, he still continued to patiently explain to him. The ignorant ones often think that light and darkness are stark opposites, while those who have a deep understanding of the two forces would understand that the extreme of darkness was light, and vice versa. Hence, the Brilliance Shrine and Darkness Shrine have never thought of completely destroying each other even though they have always been at odds. That's because the ones who truly understand the ultimate power of the two will understand that the two forces are each other's most intimate companion. The extreme of darkness is light, and the extreme of light is darkness. Lin Li repeated quietly. All of a sudden, something seemed to have shattered in his mind, and a strange sense of enlightenment suddenly appeared. In the beginning, Lin Li used the power of holy light and gloomy dark to create the light and darkness domain using the nomological power of ice as an intermediary to maintain the coexistence of light and darkness. At that juncture, Lin Li was probably like the ignorant ones, who had thought of the power of light and darkness as two opposing forces. Afterwards, Lin Li stopped bothering about the laws of ice, after he gained some enlightenment about the rules of light and darkness. At this point, he had a certain understanding of the interdependence between light and darkness. Not only was there no conflict, they could even strengthen each other. That gave rise to the lethal light and darkness sword. However, at this stage, Lin Li still could not make a breakthrough in the field of light and darkness magic, even though he had read the Light Bible in the Brilliance Shrine, where he learned about holy light magic from Rosario, and also read the darkness scripture in the Darkness Shrine, and learned about dark magic from Sendros. However, Lin Li could only feel that he had a deeper grasp of the power of light and darkness. He still did not achieve a real breakthrough in the field of light and darkness magic. That was also the very reason that Lin Li had been stagnating at the peak of level 23. It seemed that there was an invisible barrier that was preventing him from crossing the threshold to level 24. Raga's words might seem inexplicable and ridiculous to some people, but Lin Li felt that his simple sentence was the key to his breakthrough to the next realm. However, although it sounded simple, it was still difficult to execute it. If he really wanted to break through using those words, he wouldn't be able to do so within a short period of time. Nifa, who was being idle and waiting at the side, could tell that Lin Li was actually enlightened by Raga's words even though he was feeling disdainful towards him. He had no choice but to admit that the young mage Lin Li was extremely talented in magic, so much that he actually felt jealous. Recalling that he had plotted against Lin Li previously, he felt a little regretful, but he thought about the flame dragon Lothar, and stopped regretting his decision because he felt that Lin Li might not necessarily survive encountering the flame dragon Lothar. Sensing that Lin Li seemed to have had a moment of epiphany at this moment, Rog smiled with gratification and relief. However, he also felt a little regretful because if they were in a different environment, Lin Li would perhaps be able to break through the legendary realm with his epiphany. Unfortunately, it was not the time for him to feel emotional, because they were about to face the flame dragon Lothar anytime soon. Lin Li's attitude would actually bring him even more lethal dangers. Rog could only hope that Lin Li would gain more enlightenment. Rog sighed, but did not stop stimulating the branch of the Tree of Eternity. The slender branch of the Tree of Eternity on the ground quickly began to grow countless hair-like roots from the cut that was made at the bottom, which roots then plunged into the red lava on the ground continuously. If it had been an ordinary plant, it would have been burned into ashes by the high temperature before it even touched the lava. However, the roots of the branch of the Tree of Eternity not only plunged into the lava fearlessly, it also caused the lava to turn into a hard, black rock as if it had lost its heat. The hard, black rock was then crushed under the power of the roots, and turned back into black soil. With the growth of the branch of the Tree of Eternity, the process continued, and it soon expanded to the surrounding areas, creating a large fertile ground. The branch of the Tree of Eternity, which was initially slender, also expanded like a balloon during the process. The main branch became a thick trunk, and the smaller branches also became longer and thicker, giving rise to more twigs and smaller branches, which subsequently turned into sprouts. The sprouts could be seen spreading outwards at a visible speed, and their color slowly turned from light green to emerald. The leaves had also formed a huge crown, in the blink of an eye. With the continuous expansion of the black soil, the roots that originally grew from the branch of the Tree of Eternity suddenly emerged from the ground one after another, and quickly became thicker. There were more branches and sprouts, and the branch gradually turned into a buff tree. The lava on the ground of the red fire elemental world had turned into black soil, and redness in the space was quickly devoured and replaced by green. Within just a brief moment, a dense forest was formed, exuding vitality that filled the entire area. The aura of the fire elemental world seemed to be unable to penetrate the world of greenery either. At this moment, Lin Li had already snapped out of his trance. He was well aware that he could no longer allow himself to continue to feel at ease. Otherwise, he might not even know how he died. However, after sobering up, Lin Li was already facing a whole different world, and he could not help but be shocked as he observed everything in the surroundings. He almost thought that he had arrived in another world. The forest in front of him was not inferior to the emerald forest that was inhabited by the elves. In fact, it was much more beautiful. Its only flaw was that there were no birds in the forest. Otherwise, it would be a beautiful and amazing paradise that offered a perfect scenery. This is only a small amount of the power of the branch of the Tree of Eternity, and this is all I can do. This state can only be maintained for at most a day, after which everything will be restored, Rog explained with some regret after seeing that Lin Li was looking at him in shock. He then turned his head to say to Nifa, "We only have a day's time. If we can't let the flame dragon Lothar go into hibernation within a day, why? Don't worry, I won't court death together with you," said Nifa, whose eyes were filled with inconcealable worry. Even though he appeared to be indifferent to observe the surroundings, he had no choice but to look around as if he were appreciating the beautiful scenery created by the branch of the Tree of Eternity. Rog shook his head helplessly and turned to look at Lin Li again. He said, "If things really escalate to that level, I'll send you back to Anril first, and get you to help the Darkness Shrine make preparations. I hope they can survive this terrible disaster." Lin Li knew his own abilities, hence, he didn't say any foolish things about dying together. Instead, he nodded and said, "Please rest assured, High Priest. If things really develop to that extent, I'll do what you say." The battle was nigh, and there was somber tension in the air. The three of them sat on the ground, and no one was in the mood to talk. Although they were in the forest that was full of vitality, there was an aura of death everywhere because of the lack of the chirping of birds and the roaring of beasts. The lush greenery did not feel refreshing for them at all, and although there was no fire element present, everyone was filled with frustration that could not seem to go away. The flame dragon Lothar was the top powerhouse amongst the ancient dragons, and was a terrifying existence that was almost on par with the dragon aspects. Now that they were about to face a strong enemy, even Rog, who wanted to attack the flame dragon Lothar, could not help but feel nervous. His life was secondary, but if he couldn't even stop the flame dragon Lothar, who in the Darkness Shrine would be able to really save the Darkness Shrine? Rog glanced at Nifa, who was beside him. Previously, Nifa took the opportunity to release the prehistoric magical beast there while he was in deep sleep, which resulted in a huge blow to the Darkness Shrine. However, he still did not have what it took to destroy the Darkness Shrine, hence, the Darkness Shrine had the chance to rise again. However, this time, the end and destruction of the Darkness Shrine would be foreseeable if the flame dragon Lothar were to barge into Anril. Rog shifted his gaze onto Lin Li, who had awakened him, and sighed secretly in his heart. He thought, "This young mage is so young, and yet already so competent. He's so talented in magic, and I even see some of Geresko in him. However, he's still in the growing stage. After all, if Geresko was the one here with us now." At the thought of Geresko who had once fought alongside him, Rog couldn't help but be a little distracted. Although he was known as the powerful mage, who was second only to Geresko back then, who knew that he and Geresko were actually worlds apart? If Geresko had been there now, he would have probably already entered the fire elemental world, and sent the flame dragon Lothar into hibernation. At this moment, even Roger couldn't calm down, let alone Lin Li and Nifa. Nifa had always been reluctant to participate in this battle which they had no chance of winning, and he had even cursed Rog hard deep down. If it weren't for the fact that Rog mentioned in the end that he knew about the Dragon of Destruction, Nifa would rather lose the branch of the Tree of Eternity than take part in the battle that was almost sure death for them. Although his younger brother, Tutankhamun, was waiting to kill him in Anril, he could just find another space to hide in. To his dismay, the immortal king, Geresko, and his own younger brother didn't want to let him become the new Dragon of Destruction. If he were already the Dragon of Destruction now, why would he be afraid of the Flame Dragon? He thought, forget it. I'll just run away if I can't fight when the time comes. What would that Flame Dragon do if it broke into the world of Anril? What would it have to do with me? Before the battle started, Nifa had already secretly developed an idea to escape. However, he was a little reluctant to give up on the information Rog had revealed. Although Lin Li was weaker than Rog and Nifa, he was in a better mood compared to them because he knew that he was just a bystander in this battle. Apart from having to be careful not to be affected by the battle, he basically did not have much to do. Of course, Lin Li still admired Rog's determination in the end. That respectable old man had been living there for hundreds of years, and now had to risk his life to fight for the survival of the Darkness Shrine. That was something that Lin Li could never do. However, respecting him was a separate matter. Lin Li wouldn't put his life at stake just because of the respect he had for Rog. If it were within the scope of his means, he wouldn't mind giving them some help. However, he definitely couldn't intervene in such a high-level battle. Even if he were to activate his 3 pieces of the debris of the stars, they might not be enough to hurt the Flame Dragon. However, the experience also made Lin Li a little more alert and conscious. In this crazy world, legendary powerhouses were considered nothing at all, and the powerhouses of the Sanctuary Realm might not be fearless all the time, either. Rog was not in the least bit inferior to the arbitrators of the Supreme Council in terms of strength, and should be considered the strongest human standing at the top of Anril. However, he wasn't confident about winning the battle. The High Lord Osric was formidable too, but his mausoleum got plundered in the end, while his perfect body was taken away, leaving him only with the ghost of the Sky Castle. There were too many unknown and powerful existences in the world, and even the gods and deities might fall one day. If one were to think that they could dominate Anril after entering the Sanctuary Realm, he or she would probably not be far from death. While the 3 of them were thinking about the matters that they were vexed about, there was a sudden tremor that spread through the entire world. The ground beneath their feet was like a small boat that was swaying amidst the waves, about to capsize any time. The ground was covered in intertwined roots, and there were black cracks that formed in the ground during the violent tremors. The tree roots of varying thickness seemed to be getting tighter like bowstrings. There were also crisp sounds when the roots were being pulled. At the same time that the grounds were shaking, a massive fire elemental storm suddenly appeared outside the spot which used to be the channel to the fire elemental world. Apart from the main body of the branch of the Tree of Eternity, all of the other towering trees in the surroundings were instantly engulfed by the flames, which turned them into massive torches. Amidst the fire elemental storm, an extremely terrifying aura filled the entire world in an instant, and a massive oppression seemed to have descended on the temporarily existing forest. At the instant that the tremors began, the three of them leapt up from the ground, glanced at each other, and yelled in unison, "It's here!" Apart from the flame dragon Lothar, what else could result in such an abnormal phenomenon? Although the three of them were immersed in their own thoughts previously, they were instantly free from distraction now that the battle was about to begin. They cast all their emotions aside, be it worry or fear, and even Lin Li, who did not have much to do with the battle, was no exception. Be it Rog or Nifa who were in the sanctuary realm, or the legendary level Lin Li, they all knew that the stronger their enemy, the calmer they would have to be. Otherwise, they would only end up dying faster. The three of them leapt up into the air and avoided the horrifying fire elemental storm. Lin Li then looked out of the channel of the fire elemental world to see that it was already covered in red. The giant tree that had stemmed from the branch of the Tree of Eternity was the only one that was still standing and emitting a green light, which was going against the fire elemental power. The hundreds of trees around that giant tree had all been charred, and the ones in the outer radius had also withered to varying extent. Before the three of them could take action, the massive force of oppression immediately descended on this world. Lin Li, who was the weakest, almost lost control of his power of flight at this moment, and almost fell from midair. As for Rog and Nifa, they were not performing that much better despite being sanctuary-level powerhouses. Their bodies, which were originally suspended steadily in the air as if they were standing on a flat ground, began swaying uncontrollably under the massive and violent pressure. Lin Li, who had finally regained his balance after having a hard time, was also in shock at this time. The massive and unbearable oppression was probably not inferior to that of the perfect body of Osric that he'd encountered previously. Besides, it was coming from the fire elemental world channel. At this time, Lin Li was even more certain that he really couldn't intervene in that battle, because his strength was way too inferior. Intervention would just be courting death for him. Back when Lin Li had faced the perfect body of Osric, which had level 26 to level 27's power, Lin Li had a group of legendary level companions. However, that perfect body had been only manipulated by a tiny soul imprint of Osric's. It wouldn't even use any powerful magic, and simply relied on its formidable physical strength. It was also limited by the crystal coffin. The limitations were also the reason that the perfect body did not exert level 26 to level 27 strength that had given Lin Li the chance to win during the dangerous situation. However, they were now facing the flame dragon Lothar, which was not restrained like Osric's perfect body had been. Instead, it was a bona fide powerhouse of the sanctuary realm. Although the level did not mean everything, ignoring the difference in level, when everything was true to level would simply be courting one's death. While the three were watching and keeping their guard up, the fire elemental world channel was also continuously expanded and torn under the irresistible power. Next, a massive figure wrapped in golden flames squeezed out of the channel tyrannically, and the oppression in the air that was initially already terrifying enough became purer and more brutal with the appearance of this figure. Roar! With a groundbreaking dragon's roar, the massive figure wrapped in golden flames finally surged out of the channel and announced his arrival to the entire world. It then flew up into the sky and looked down at everything on the ground beneath it. At this moment, the entire world seemed to be shuddering under the unparalleled pressure. The laws that constituted the world also seemed to be moaning as if they could no longer tolerate the existence of such a powerful entity. The flame dragon Lothar. At this moment, Lin Li gritted his teeth while a thin layer of sweat formed on his forehead, and he finally managed not to embarrass himself under the brutal pressure. The strength of the flame dragon Lothar might not be comparable to that of High Lord Osric, but it was definitely much stronger than Osric's perfect body. After comparing the aura of the flame dragon Lothar to that of the perfect body that he saw at that time, Lin Li obtained some horrifying results. The strength of the ancient flame dragon Lothar was probably already at level 28. In the face of the powerful aura exuded by the flame dragon Lothar, the auras of the two sanctuary realm powerhouses, Rog and Nifa, were almost completely suppressed and overshadowed. That was evidence of the massive gap between them in strength. Roar! The noble and great flame dragon King Lothar has awakened. You damned titans, serve up your hearts obediently, exclaimed Lothar, who had just awakened, and was obviously extremely excited. After rushing out of the fire elemental world, he did not pay attention to the surrounding environment at all, and simply began yelling with excitement. What surprised Lin Li was that the language used by the flame dragon Lothar was not the ancient dragon language, but the language of the Titans. Fortunately, Lin Li had already studied the Book of Eternity for a long time, and had dabbled in ancient dragon language, as well as the language of the Titans. Hence, he could somehow figure out the meaning of Lothar's words. However, after finding out what Lothar was saying, Lin Li began to feel a little puzzled. Did this flame dragon turn silly after sleeping for too long? The Titans had disappeared from the world of Anril for many years, and after the prehistoric times, there was still the long and arduous Dark Age. It had been more than 1,000 years since the end of the Dark Age. Has this flame dragon been sleeping since the prehistoric times? He shouldn't be said to be the most powerful one among the ancient Wyrms, then. He should just be the one that's best at sleeping. The Titans have long left this world, and so have the ancient Wyrms. Even the High Elves have already died more than 1,000 years ago. For you, there are no longer any enemies that are worth fighting in this world. You might as well go back to sleep. Lin Li shouted loudly to the flame dragon Lothar, which was in the sky while resisting the terrifying oppression. Lin Li wasn't afraid of attracting Lothar's attention, since he was a level 23 legendary mage, who was probably less significant than a mosquito in Lothar's eyes. Even if Lothar had noticed Lin Li, he would probably be too lazy to even retaliate. Moreover, the three of them were there to stop Lothar. Even if he never noticed the three of them, Roger and Nifa would definitely not sit back and do nothing when he left for Anril. As for the sneak attacks, there was no need to think about it at this juncture unless there was a sanctuary-level assassin with them. With such a powerful enemy, Rog and the others would have a pathetic chance of winning. It would be best if they didn't have to fight. Lin Li decided to yell out all of the historical information that he knew after hearing the flame dragon Lothar mention wanting to fight the Titans right after it emerged. He hoped that the battle-obsessed psycho would go back and continue to sleep because he had no opponents. However, Lin Li regretted his decision a little after yelling. He panicked while being under the pressure just now, and thus spoke in lingua franca. Hence, he was thinking about how he could say those words in dragon language. Is that a bug? A tiny and pathetic little bug is actually so delusional to think that he can deceive me, the flame dragon Lothar yelled. After hearing Lin Li's words, he really noticed the three small figures in the air in the distance. Hence, he zoomed towards the trio and looked down at them disdainfully, for they were small fries in his eyes. Lin Li had yet to think about how he should use the dragon language to communicate with Lothar. After all, the dragon language mentioned in the Book of Eternity was related to magic, but he did not expect the flame dragon Lothar to not only be able to speak the language of Titans, but also understand the lingua franca of humans. However, he obviously did not believe what Lin Li had said. The sudden appearance of the flame dragon Lothar left Rog and Nifa with no choice but to retreat a little. It was worse for Lin Li, for he was already overwhelmed with the terrifying aura, before he could even understand what Lothar said in dragon language. Had Rog not shielded him, he would have probably already fallen onto the ground immediately. Damn, is this the difference in strength? Lin Li thought to himself while trying to stabilize his body awkwardly. He continuously cursed in his heart, and at the same time, he set his sights on the terrifying flame dragon Lothar. When looked at from a distance, the flame dragon Lothar was like a golden fireball. Now that Lin Li was right in front, he was finally able to see through the golden flames and catch a vague glimpse of the true features of the ancient flame dragon Lothar. It was a huge red Wyrm that was surrounded by the golden flames. However, its massive body was several times larger than the crimson dragon that Lin Li had seen. On its huge head, there were two huge dragon horns with jagged edges, and sharp projections of different length were distributed all over its face and neck, making it look extremely hideous and terrifying. Its body was covered in red scales that loomed in the golden flames, appearing as radiant as glistening gemstones. It was as if there were mysterious magic symbols flashing on every scale. The appearance of the scales alone was enough to make Lin Li feel helpless. He could totally feel that the strong defense of the scales were definitely not something a person of the legendary level like himself could break through. There was a large pair of wings made of flesh on the back of the fire dragon Lothar. When spread open, it seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun, completely blocking their sight. The powerful natural mageths on the wings were particularly eye-catching in the golden flames, and each mageth seemed to be continuously exuding daunting magical waves. Its strong and thick limbs contained incredibly strong power, and its sharp claws were like massive red sickles that seemed to be able to easily tear the world apart. We didn't lie to you. There are no titans in the world now, and there are only humans like us. Although Rog wanted to stop Lothar from going out resolutely, he would naturally opt to resolve the crisis without getting physical. Rog spoke in dragon language, but Lothar unexpectedly used lingua franca, and said in a tone that was full of disdain, "You pathetic bugs are not fit to speak in the dragon language. You can't deceive me with your lies. The damned titans haven't left. They're watching the world above the sky, and they will return sooner or later." Lin Li didn't expect the flame dragon Lothar, who had been sleeping for a long time, to be so proficient at various languages. He could speak in lingua franca so fluently that he could even speak the High Elves' language. Of course, at this time, Lin Li could not continue the meaningless questions, because Roger had already hinted for him to retreat. Clearly, the brutal and stubborn flame dragon Lothar couldn't be persuaded by words at all. The battle between the parties that had a great disparity in strength was definitely inevitable. When Lin Li was retreating, a powerful mana wave also emerged from Rogi's body, making his entire body become even more eye-catching and hot. At the same time, under his control, the forest that had been damaged by the fire elemental storm had also recovered rapidly. In fact, it was even more lush than before. The branch of the Tree of Eternity was Rogi's greatest hope and support for stopping Lothar. However, now that he understood how powerful and strong the ancient Wyrm was, he began to doubt if the branch of the Tree of Eternity would be able to result in any significant effects. He had no choice but to rely on his own efforts, and he dared not be negligent at all. Seeing that Rog was already looking ready to fight, Nifa had no choice but to sigh secretly. He immediately transformed into a massive black dragon. However, compared to the flame dragon Lothar, Nifa still appeared to be much smaller, and the aura of destruction and evilness seemed to have barely taken up some space within Lothar's aura. Lothar simply dismissed Lin Li in disdain, and only the two of them in front of Lin Li could slightly catch his attention. However, after Nifa turned into a black dragon, Lothar felt the insignificant aura of destruction and darkness. A look of surprise formed in his eyes, and he sneered, "You're Azarda's son. Seems like you've really inherited his penchant for being depraved. You've really become as lowly as those small fries, after hanging out with them." For Wyrms, it would not be difficult to turn into humanoid form. However, to the Wyrms, it would undoubtedly be a form of depravity, just like how humans were usually unwilling to become beasts. Lothar had long detected the aura of destruction and evilness coming from Nifa, but deep down, he didn't think that a dragon would be able to turn into a human, and thus didn't think about the dragon of destruction. Now that Nifa returned to the form of a black dragon, Lothar immediately recognized him, but his heart was filled with even more disdain. "You know about my father." Nifa was not infuriated because of Lothar's sarcasm, but was rather interested about what Lothar mentioned about his father, the dragon of destruction. If he could find out some information that he wanted to know about his father from Lothar, would it still be necessary for him to continue joining forces with Roger to fight that powerful enemy? AKMP8. Lothar humped coldly while breathing out some flames from his nostrils that resembled caves. Filled with disdain, he said, "Your father had really embarrassed the Wyrms back then. As a dragon aspect, he actually got worried all over a trivial matter. It's a shame to the Wyrms." Nifa was hatched by the immortal king, and although he had always wanted to become the new dragon of destruction, he never felt any affection for his father, Azardus, the dragon of destruction. Hence, although Lothar made Azardus out to be extremely pathetic and horrid, Nifa remained indifferent and unaffected. The only thing that he was truly concerned about was how he could become the new dragon of destruction. He nonchalantly asked, "What is the trivial matter that you mentioned? Actually, it's really ridiculous that your father Azardus actually wanted to destroy the Tree of Eternity, because he wanted to destroy the tiny and weak race that had just appeared. Besides, the more ridiculous thing is that his reason for doing so was apparently because we, the Wyrms, will be replaced by those pathetic creatures. This is the greatest joke I have ever heard. How could the insignificant small fries replace us? Everyone knows that we're so strong that we can easily turn those pathetic creatures into ashes with just one claw of ours," Lothar said in a contemptuous tone, as if he were just telling a joke. Although Lin Li had retreated rather far away, he could still hear the conversation between Lothar and Nifa very clearly. Apparently, Lothar was referring to the High Elves that were birthed by the Tree of Eternity. However, as Lin Li really knew about the events of history, he wouldn't take Azardus, the dragon of destruction, as a joke, since everyone knew that after the end of prehistoric times, the High Elves had really replaced the ancient Wyrms and became the true rulers of the entire Anril. They had even created an unprecedented dynasty. However, Lothar, who had just woken up from a deep sleep, didn't know about that. and it was still an extremely absurd joke to him. After bursting into laughter that made the entire space quake, Lothar looked at Nifa contemptuously, and said, "However, there's something more ridiculous than this. Do you know what it is? Azardus, the dragon of destruction, who was also a dragon aspect, actually died in the hands of those pathetic weaklings. He is not worthy to be a dragon aspect, or one of the Wyrms at all." Clearly, the flame dragon Lothar, whose powers were said to be almost on the level of the dragon aspects, had always been dissatisfied with the fact that the dragon of destruction Azardus had become a dragon aspect. However, Nifa was not bothered by such grudges at all. He was, in fact, a little excited when he heard Lothar mention that his father had died in the hands of weaklings. He knew that Lothar should have been referring to the battle where the immortal king killed the dragon of destruction. Now that Lothar had mentioned it, he could perhaps find out more information. "You know about that battle. What else do you know?" Nifa asked while suppressing his enthusiasm and glancing at Rog, who was beside him. Previously, Rog had told him that he was the only other person apart from the immortal king and the dragon of destruction who knew about that battle. Will his lie be exposed? However, to Nifa's disappointment, there wasn't much of a change in Rog's expression. On the other hand, Lothar's answer made him feel extremely disappointed. "How is that considered a battle? A fight between Wyrms and those weaklings is considered a battle too. Had I known that Azardus would end up getting killed by those weaklings, I might have gone to save him," Lothar said with great disdain. "Damn it, if you'd run into the immortal king, you'd long have gotten ripped apart and skinned alive. You probably wouldn't even have been able to keep any descendants." Nifa was filled with hatred. He initially wanted to get some useful information from Lothar so that he wouldn't have to join forces with Rog. However, it seemed that his wish wasn't going to come true. "Okay, I've been asleep for such a long time. I'm going to find those damn titans and get some exercise. I'm not in the mood to stay here with you and waste any more time," Lothar said impatiently. Obviously, he felt that Rog and Nifa the dragon were not qualified to be his opponents at all. He had only bothered to say a few more words because he saw Nifa, Azardus' son. "I'm sorry, I can't let you out," said Rog, who had been remaining silent for a long time, and only spoke all of a sudden when Lothar was about to leave. Before Lothar could even reply, a green ray of light was emitted from the forest that was formed from the branch of the tree of eternity. The light filled the entire space in an instant, and the golden flames that engulfed Lothar's body seemed to have been suppressed amidst the green light, and became slightly dim all of a sudden. However, that was not all. Rog immediately waved his hand, and a black beam of light that had a diameter of more than 10 meters fell from the sky and landed on Lothar's back. Seeing that Rog had attacked, Lin Li retreated again and again. It was not a matter of courage, but rather that the level of both parties in the battle was far beyond his. He had to take care of himself instead of getting distracted by Rog. After retreating to a safe range, Lin Li did not slack, and instead kept his eyes fixed on the battlefield in the distance. It was a real sanctuary-level battle. Even if he only got to learn a thing or two, it would still be a great gain. "He's just a small fry, and yet he actually dared to provoke me," Lothar thought. Although the black beam of light that fell from the sky did not cause any harm to Lothar, the humiliation it brought was absolutely unforgivable. Of course, Lothar was not infuriated because of it. Although he had a bad temper, who would get angry over a trivial weakling? Hence, Lothar simply opened his mouth and blew a shot of dragon breath at Rog, which was ordinary to Wyrms. Blowing out dragon breath was the most common form of attack used by Wyrms, and for them, it was just like a basic instinct. It was akin to breathing, which came naturally to humans. However, after Lothar breathed out the dragon breath, even Lin Li, who was keeping a safe distance, couldn't help but feel a tinge of fear in his heart. It was because Lin Li could clearly feel the power of the laws in it. The dragon breath was even more terrifying than legendary magic in power. Facing Lothar's dragon breath, Rog could resist it, but he didn't force himself to. In fact, he did not even persist on for the sake of stopping Lothar, and instead flew straight to the dense forest. It seemed that Rog was going to run away and give up his plan to stop Lothar. However, in reality, he was trying to lure Lothar into the forest. His method was not a smart one. In fact, it could be considered obvious, and anyone would be able to read his intentions. However, the ingenuity and effectiveness of the method was only one aspect. More importantly, it depended on whom the target was. Although Lothar was not stupid, and could tell that Rog was trying to lure him into the forest, he did not simply want to leave this world. He wanted to leave because he wanted to fight the Titans, and didn't mind spending some time to get rid of the weaklings who had provoked him before going on to deal with the damned Titans. Hence, after seeing that Rog and Nifa were flying towards the forest, Lothar did not hesitate at all, and immediately chased them domineeringly. After breaking into the forest, Lothar also acutely detected the strangeness around him, knowing that the forest seemed to be able to exert some suppression on his own power. However, he didn't take it to heart, because he knew his opponent's abilities well. Even if he was a little suppressed, it wouldn't change the disparity in strength at all. In fact, that was indeed the case. Although Lothar had been successfully lured into the forest, it would still be impossible for Rog and Nifa to defeat Lothar, who had level 28 power. However, there was nowhere they could run to. After all, Rog's purpose was to stop Lothar from entering Anril, and not escape from Lothar. Although Lin Li had seen the arbitrator Megard launching an attack in the Shadowglen, the three undead lords, who were his opponents, were too weak for Megard to display true sanctuary-level power. On the other hand, he had also seen the battle between Garesko and the Evil Eye Tyrant through the Spastime beacon spell at Tutankhamun's place. However, he had merely seen it, and he could not feel anything else. Now that he was truly watching a sanctuary-level battle, he could finally feel the power of the sanctuary realm. Is this the power of the sanctuary level? Lin Li was shocked to see the battle in the forest, and he finally understood why those on the legendary level would use the laws through magic, while those of the sanctuary realm would form magic, using laws. Or rather, they controlled the laws. Although Lin Li had only been in the legendary realm for a short period of time, which was about 2 years since the start of the Throne of Darkness incident, he had fought with legendary mages numerous times before. Legendary mages could create corresponding magical domains through their understanding of the laws, after which they could use the magical domains to utilize the laws. Magical domains could be considered the most powerful offensive and defensive techniques that legendary mages could possess. In fact, they could also be considered a type of magic that conformed to certain laws. Almost all legendary mages would activate their magical domains at the instant that they began fighting, for that was the only way they could use them to the greatest extent. Lin Li noticed that Rog, Nifa, and Lothar, the three powerhouses of the sanctuary realm, did not activate their magical domains during the fight. However, he could clearly feel that each of them was shrouded in pure power of the laws. Perhaps their magical domains had been present around them all along, just like how there would always be air around a person. They did not have to deliberately use the magical domains, just like how humans did not have to deliberately make their hearts beat. The laws seemed to have completely integrated with their bodies. The magic released by every move of theirs and every chant of the spell contained pure power of the laws. Their bodies were magical domains, and the areas covered by their aura and magical waves were also magical domains. The flame dragon Lothar, which was a level 28 powerhouse of the sanctuary realm, could be considered to have reached the peak of the sanctuary realm, and it would be no exaggeration to say that he was almost turning into a god. The blazing golden flames on his body were no longer actual flames, but rather were completely composed of various laws of fire. It was a terrifying power that seemed to be able to burn the heaven and earth. In terms of controlling the nomological power of fire, the flame dragon Lothar had definitely reached the peak. Not only did his dragon breath contain terrifying nomological power of fire, his gaze did too. The power had truly been incorporated into every cell of his body. If Lothar could advance half a step further in strength, he would perhaps really become a god that represented the will of fire. Even with the suppression of the power from the branch of the Tree of Eternity, Lothar's strength was not something that Roger and Nifa could truly contend with. Ever since Lothar chased them to the forest, the battle became extremely thrilling. However, it was only daunting for Lin Li because he was scared for Rog almost every moment, and he was frightened whenever Rog has a close shave with death. Lin Li was not only worried because Rog might not be able to send him away, but also because he respected Rog greatly and did not wish to see him falling into the doldrums. However, in the current situation, Lin Li could do nothing but panic. There was no way he could use his abilities and trump cards at this juncture. On the battlefield, Rog's body was shrouded in the domain created by the laws of darkness, but it was different from the so-called darkness domain. This one not only exhibited the power of darkness, it also contained a type of divine power. As Rog said to Lin Li before, the extreme of darkness was light, and Rog's darkness domain had reached the extreme of possessing attributes of light. Lin Li couldn't detect any evilness or darkness from Rog's darkness domain, and he simply felt that the entire darkness domain was glistening with some divine light. Under Rog's previous guidance, Lin Li had already gained some insights into the relationship between the powers of darkness and light. Now that he was looking at Rog's darkness domain, he suddenly felt that he had gotten a clearer idea of their relationship. Unfortunately, it was not the time for him to calm down and study it carefully at this juncture. Although he was just a bystander, he'd definitely die if he got distracted. Although Rog was already a top powerhouse in Anril, he was still powerless, facing the flame dragon Lothar, which was close to becoming a god. Rog could persist for so long because he was ready to go all out, and had put aside the importance of his own life. He was almost maniacal, when exerting all his powers, relying on his greatest hope, the dense forest, which was a transformation of the branch of the tree of eternity. In addition to the suppression that the vitality of the greenery, which was shrouding the forest, inflicted on Lothar's powers, Rog was also continuously manipulating the plants in the forest to attack Lothar while using his own powers. He was still trying hard even though his attacks seemed more like just harassment. The grass that was growing wildly turned into a rain of arrows darting towards Lothar, and the python-like vines continued to coil around Lothar continuously. When Lothar passed by the towering trees, they suddenly turned into treemen and leapt towards Lothar, who was covered in flames. However, those attacks were worse than tickles to Lothar. In fact, none of the attacks could even land on his body, because they were all instantly incinerated by the golden flames on his body. Disgusting weakling, you can't escape. Anyone who provokes the power of the Weir must pay the price for doing so, Lothar yelled. But he wasn't that angry. To him, an insignificant small fry wasn't worthy of his anger at all, though it was indeed a little annoying. Lothar smacked away the magic spells that were coming his way with one claw, and at the same time swung his claws to throw out countless golden lines of flames, which seemed to have formed a golden fire net that instantly blocked the duo from hiding. Although the golden lines were extremely fine and slender, each of them contained pure fire nomological power that could burn others. To Sanctuary Realm powerhouses, who used nomological power, this was absolutely fatal. Sensing the terrifying power contained in the golden lines of flames, Lin Li, who had been feeling scared for Rog, was even more frightened at this point. At least in his opinion, suffering the attacks of Lothar was absolutely inevitable if he were to put himself in Rog's position. However, if he wanted to resist, it would be hard for him to make effective defenses, because of the characteristics of the flames that could burn everything. If Lin Li had reached the Sanctuary Realm, he might be able to cope with the power of the debris of the stars. Likewise, if the baby elemental worm Xiaohua reached the Sanctuary Realm, it should be able to cope by relying on its mastery of the elemental laws. However, those were all just ifs. Rog did not have any debris of the stars, nor would he use them. Xiaohua had yet to reach the Sanctuary Realm too. Hence, its mastery of the elemental laws could not suppress the flame dragon Lothar. Even Lin Li could see the threat of the golden lines made of flames, so Rog was naturally clear about it too. At the same time that he was retreating, a wall of light that was filled with holy aura instantly appeared in front of him. However, it was clear that even the laws of holy light, which were said to be able to purify everything, were as fragile as a piece of paper, into the destructive laws contained in the golden lines of flames. After the wall of light appeared, Roger manipulated the vines in the eternal forest to weave a green barrier. However, the eternal forest was just transformed from a section of the branch of the tree of eternity, after all, and Rog had only activated a small amount of power in the branch of the tree of eternity. As soon as the green barrier touched the fire net formed by the golden flames, it was instantly cut to pieces and burned into ashes in the blink of an eye. However, this green barrier was not completely useless. The vitality that it contained had some suppressing effect on the destructive nomological power. After the green barrier was burned and destroyed, the fire net woven by the golden lines of flames had become much dimmer. In fact, if they were in the real eternal forest, and if Rog was able to exert just half of the power in the branch of the tree of eternity, the golden fire net would have no chance of advancing at all. It took less than a second for the green barrier to be burned. Although Rog retreated very quickly and cast two consecutive barriers to stop the net, it still managed to chase him all the way. At this moment, Rog really had nowhere to retreat, and could only rely on his own strength to resist. At this moment, a patch of red that resembled the tongue of a venomous snake flashed in front of Rog. Upon sight of this, Lin Li finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although the redness was fleeting, he could still acutely detect the aura of destruction and evilness. Clearly, Nifa had taken the initiative to resolve the crisis for Rog. Indeed, after Rog's crisis was resolved, Nifa, who had turned into a black dragon, continued to harass Lothar while smugly saying, "Old Rog, you should be more careful. I think you'd better tell me what I want to know. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will save you next time. If you want to know, wait for me to finish this first," Rog said calmly before going all out to attack Lothar. Compared to Rog, who had been having close shaves with death, Nifa's situation was much better. From the beginning of the battle, he had been moving around like a loach. As long as there was the slightest danger, he would immediately flee and avoid fighting Lothar head-on. In strict accordance with the previous agreement, he was only responsible for harassing Lothar. Nifa didn't want to go all out, but he didn't want Rog to die, either. It was not that he was kind-hearted, but rather that Rog was holding on to an important piece of information. However, Nifa was filled with dismay even though he sounded relaxed. Although the laws of destruction that he'd mastered had the characteristic of destroying everything in the world, its effects depended on the strength of the person using it. Even his father, Azardus the Dragon of Destruction, dared not say that he could really destroy everything in the world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been killed by the immortal king. Nifa was still not the Dragon of Destruction yet, and his powers were inferior to Rog's. What more Lothar's? Even though the vitality of the branch of the Tree of Eternity would weaken the power of the Golden Fire Net, the attack made him suffer. Upon sight of the nomological power of destruction that Nifa was exhibiting, Lin Li's eyes immediately glistened. Although his magical domain was created with the nomological power of light and darkness, he would be at a greater advantage if he could have more understanding of the laws of destruction. That would help him in mastering the debris of the stars, Thunderbolt, which contained the laws of destruction. Nifa had inherited the nomological power of destruction and evilness from the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. Although he was the weakest in this battle, he was still a real powerhouse of the Sanctuary Realm, after all. Just like the other two Sanctuary powerhouses, the black dragon that Nifa transformed into was engulfed in a domain where the rules of destruction and evilness overlapped. The evil, cruel, and insidious qualities of the nomological power of evilness formed a thick dark red mist that continuously exuded a gloomy and bloody aura. However, Nifa refused to exert much strength during the battle against Lothar. He would merely harass Lothar a little when he was sure that there was absolutely no danger. He did not show much nomological power of destruction and evilness. After observing for a while, Lin Li did not manage to learn much from Nifa, especially in terms of the nomological power of the laws of destruction, which he was more concerned about. It seemed that he was bad at applying the laws of evilness, because he had yet to become the real dragon of destruction. The battle between the parties that had a great disparity in strength continued. Rog, who was going all out, fighting toe-to-toe against Lothar, was still in a perpetual crisis. Fortunately, he managed to survive by relying on the support of the Eternal Forest and Nifa's help. However, things seemed to be developing according to Rog's wishes. The vitality of the Eternal Forest was gradually increasing with time, thus giving him more and more aid. Lothar let out a deafening roar all of a sudden, and his voice was full of anger. He then emitted an even more menacing and eye-catching flame while releasing numerous powerful magic spells that contained the nomological power of fire at the forest. The tall trees, sturdy vines, and dense grass were all destroyed in large amounts by the bombardment of magic. Although it hadn't been long since they entered the forest, Lothar still couldn't tolerate the fact that he had wasted so much time on a small fry. If it weren't for that forest, he would have long burned him to ashes. Hence, Lothar could no longer be bothered about Rog and Nifa, and instead decided to completely destroy that damned forest. After all, the forest was not the actual eternal forest. The greenery initially destroyed by Lothar could still quickly recover with its immense vitality. However, when the level 28 flame dragon Lothar began to destroy the forest with all his strength, the forest definitely couldn't recover quickly enough. Rog suddenly became anxious after seeing such a scene. The forest was the most important factor in stopping Lothar from entering Anril. Although all of Lothar's attention was on destroying the forest, Rog didn't take this opportunity to attack. He had no choice but to stop and chant his prayers while channeling the power of the branch of the Tree of Eternity with all his might, even though he knew that doing so would only result in minimal effects. Even Lin Li didn't dare to sit back and do nothing at this moment. Although his power was limited, he would definitely be able to do something. Lin Li raised the Helios scepter in his hand without hesitation, and bombarded Lothar, who was destroying the forest with the most powerful legendary magic that he had. However, the facts prove that Lin Li's legendary power really didn't have any effect in a sanctuary-level battle. In Lin Li's opinion, his legendary magic spells were already rather powerful. However, they only caused the golden flame on the flame dragon Lothar's body to sway slightly. Under such circumstances, Lin Li could only feel helpless. He reckoned that even if he were to unleash all three of his pieces of the debris of the stars, he would not be able to cause much damage to the flame dragon Lothar. However, under Rog's full support, the recovery speed of the Eternal Forest was improved again, and he had also managed to stop Lothar and slow down the damage that he was doing to the forest. The plants outside the forest had become sparse, and some had even withered. Plants were continuously growing out of the spot where Lothar was, and they began to flock towards Lothar like a huge army of plants. This time, the flame dragon Lothar became even more annoyed and infuriated. He had woken up from a deep sleep and wanted to fight the titans to get some exercise. However, he ended up getting provoked by some small fry, whom he thought he could kill easily. However, he ended up getting stuck in a scuffle with him for such a long time because of the damned forest. He wanted to destroy the forest, but the forest was recovering faster than before. Lothar obviously couldn't tolerate the fact that he couldn't destroy a small fry and an entire forest despite being a wyrm. However, Lothar was not a fool. After the resistance of the eternal forest suddenly strengthened, he immediately noticed what was going wrong. He'd initially thought that the forest was a natural phenomenon of this world, and that there was nothing strange about the immense vitality, because forests were supposed to be full of life anyway. Later on, he got into a fight with Rog. Although Lothar was constantly attacked by the trees in the forest, his power and the vitality of the forest were conflicting in the first place. He had seen aggressive plants before, and he simply thought that Rog was manipulating the vitality of the plants. However, after seeing the sudden change in the forest, and linking it to Rog's prayers, Lothar immediately understood that the entire forest was controlled by the insignificant figure in his eyes. Having figured that out, Lothar immediately stopped destroying the forest, and instead turned around to dash towards Rog, who was still chanting the prayers loudly. The nomological power of fire that formed the golden flames on his body instantly condensed into countless powerful fire spells and a flaming torrent that surged towards Rog. At this moment, Rog was still chanting prayers and trying his best to sustain the eternal forest. He couldn't dodge at all, and the only thing he could do was to control the plants in the eternal forest and manipulate them into forming a green barrier in front of the terrifying flaming torrent. However, every magic spell launched by a level 28 sanctuary powerhouse would contain nomological power, and the flaming torrent formed by those spells would definitely be able to destroy the world. The green barriers that were made up of plants were so weak that they were instantly destroyed whenever the flaming torrent passed by. Although the flaming torrent was greatly weakened by the layers of obstruction and the vitality of the eternal forest, it was still terrifying, and Rog would definitely have a hard time. Not to mention, the menacing flame dragon Lothar was right behind the flaming torrent. Lothar must have made up his mind to kill Rog in one fell swoop. Seeing such a situation, Lin Li's heart suddenly sank to rock bottom. That power was simply unparalleled for humans, and Rog would probably have to wish for a miracle to happen in order for him to escape. Lin Li had cooperated with others on many expeditions, and he was the one to create miracles on most occasions. However, in the face of such a situation, he couldn't come up with a solution at all. The flaming torrent was about to devour Rog's body, but at this moment, a huge black figure appeared in front of Rog like a giant gate that was about to intercept the flaming torrent. At this moment, Lin Li dared not believe his eyes at all, because the one who blocked the attack for Rog turned out to be Nifa, who had been sneaking in. At this time, Nifa did not hesitate to overdraft his mana and mental strength in order to maximize the power of his laws of destruction and laws of evilness. The bloody mist around his body also appeared to be much thicker, but his massive body still seemed rather small compared to the flaming torrent. In the blink of an eye, Nifa's figure was submerged in the fiery red flames, and the roar of the dragon that was filled with agony could be heard. However, his roar was soon drowned out by the sounds of the magic attacks. When the flaming torrent came to an end, Nifa's body finally emerged gradually, and the thick bloody mist had become much thinner. Most of the black scales on his body, which had been originally smooth, became dim and broken. His body was full of burns, and he looked extremely disheveled. However, even though they survived the flaming torrent, the crisis that Nifa and Rog were facing had yet to really be resolved. "Indeed, you are just as depraved as your father," Lothar exclaimed, shifting all of his attention and anger onto the traitor of the wyrms when he saw that his supposed shot of victory was actually blocked by Nifa. Although Lothar was harassed by Nifa from time to time in battle, he felt that Nifa was not really helping Rog, because Nifa wasn't putting in much effort. Hence, he did not take Nifa's previous harassment to heart. However, now that Nifa had actually used his body to block a fatal attack for Rog, Lothar felt somewhat betrayed. The anger that this brought suddenly surpassed everything, and Lothar even developed a strong hatred for Nifa. The small fry in the forest no longer mattered to him. The only thing he wanted to do was to kill the traitor of wyrms who was in front of him before the heavily injured Nifa could rejoice about being alive. He shuddered uncontrollably because Lothar glowered at him with a resentful gaze. Feeling wronged, he thought, "Do you think I wanted to do this? If it was not for the sake of getting the information that Rog has, why would I play hero?" However, the flame dragon Lothar didn't care about Nifa's reasons, nor intended to give him any chance at all. Instead, he leapt towards Nifa without stopping. Nifa was much less powerful than the flame dragon Lothar in the first place, and now that he was seriously injured, he definitely dared not go toe-to-toe against Lothar at all. He didn't care about Rog, who was behind him, and frantically fled to the side. However, to Nifa's dismay, Lothar actually ignored Rog, who was close at hand, changed directions, and chased after him immediately. A hot pursuit began in the quasi-eternal forest. Upon sight of this, Rog decided to stop moving. In fact, he couldn't move anyway. If it weren't for the last-ditch efforts that Nifa had put forth just now, how could he have survived Lothar's attack? Nifa's injury would not affect his mobility, but Rog was severely injured by the nomological power during the scuffle. However, it was not the time to rest and heal his wounds now. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Rog stood still and continued to chant prayers to help the forest recover in hopes of using the power of the eternal forest to make the flame dragon Lothar go to sleep again. High Priest, I hope this thing can help you, Lin Li said as he flew up to Rog after seeing Nifa, luring Lothar away. He then took out the Seed of Eternity that he had obtained from the Sky Castle. The Seed of the Tree of Eternity. Rog exclaimed in shock as he immediately recognized what Lin Li was holding. The Seed of Eternity and the branch of the Tree of Eternity were completely different. The branch of the Tree of Eternity only contained a small amount of power of the Tree of Eternity, while the Seed of Eternity contained the inheritance of all the power of the Tree of Eternity. If the Eternal Forest was spawned from the Seed of Eternity, it would not be as difficult for Rog and his companions to deal with the Flame Dragon Lothar. However, after sensing Rog's shock, Lin Li appeared a little awkward, and he said, "It is indeed the Seed of the Tree of Eternity. However, it was already dead when I got it. I wonder if it'd be of any use here." One reason why Lin Li hadn't given the Seed of Eternity to Rog was that he hadn't known that the Flame Dragon Lothar would be this terrifying. Another reason was that he felt that a dead Seed of Eternity might not be of much help to Rog at all. After all, the dead Seed of Eternity was just a huge mana source in Lin Li's opinion. It had no other use other than providing huge amounts of mana. "Is it dead?" Rog asked as he had also sensed the abnormality of the Seed of Eternity. However, he was only taken aback for a moment, after which he excitedly said, "But it doesn't matter, I think we can give it a try." Rog was actually not too confident, but there was really no other solution. Given his current strength and power, everyone knew that he probably wouldn't succeed in putting the Flame Dragon Lothar back to sleep just by exerting the power of the branch of the Tree of Eternity to the current level. Since Rog said he could give it a try, Lin Li didn't say anything more, and simply handed the Seed of Eternity over to Rog. He couldn't even think about reviving the Seed of Eternity in his wonderful hopes of planting the Tree of Eternity in the Tower of the Dusk. As long as he could survive this crisis, he'd not hesitate to give it away at all, even if the Seed of Eternity ended up getting destroyed, because saving his own life was the only way he could have the opportunity to think about the future. Otherwise, what would be the point of keeping the Seed of Eternity? Besides, in the current situation, the Seed of Eternity was all that Lin Li could offer, though he had no idea what effects it could exert. Although the 5 pieces of the debris of the stars were powerful, Lin Li could only exert their power by relying on the understanding that he had before he transmigrated. He was not afraid that Rog wouldn't return the debris of the stars to him, but rather was worried that Rog might end up being hurt by the debris of the stars before he could use it to defeat the Flame Dragon Lothar. Rog didn't delay much, and used his mental strength to feel the Seed of Eternity. After receiving it from Lin Li, a look of excitement flashed in his eyes. However, Rog did not explain to Lin Li, and simply held up the Seed of Eternity, while chanting a prayer that was completely different from the previous one. The Seed of Eternity, that was initially shrouded in a green light, seemed to have come alive at this moment as it continuously devoured the aura of life in the eternal forest. It then spat out a massive and purer aura of life. Rog looked extremely pious as he chanted the prayers while exuding pure holy light, which made Lin Li feel as if he were bathing in holy light. However, at this time, Lin Li wasn't in the mood to enjoy the comfort in his body, and instead shifted his gaze onto the forest not far away. There was an intense battle going on between Nifa and Lothar, who were embroiled in a chase. Nifa was cursing loudly, while Lothar was roaring in exasperation. There were also the deafening roars of various magic spells, making the entire forest quake. Ever since Lin Li discovered that he had almost fallen for Nifa's trap, he had been wishing he could rip the damned black dragon Nifa apart. If he hadn't used Gloomy Dark when fighting with the Fire Phoenix and awakened Rog, everything would have probably gone according to the plot Nifa had hatched. Lin Li could not help but pray that poor Nifa could withstand the Flame Dragon Lothar's attacks for a little longer. He had no other choice. Rog still needed some time to activate the power of the branch and Seed of the Tree of Eternity, and Lin Li was certain that he wouldn't have enough strength to tackle the Flame Dragon Lothar. Lin Li had been really concerned about Rog's strategy from the beginning of the battle. Now, he even had to worry for Nifa, despite being enemies with him. This was a really helpless situation. Although Nifa was not the real dragon of destruction, and his power was a lot lower than the flame dragon Lothar's, he was able to maximize the deceit in the laws of evilness. That enabled him to escape from the flame dragon Lothar many times. However, the development of the situation was not always as hoped. The difference in abilities was not something to be easily overcome, and Nifa had suffered substantial injuries when he helped Rog deal with the flaming torrent earlier on. What was more important was the fact that the flame dragon Lothar was a magical beast with brains. His immense power was one of the reasons that helped him survive through the prehistoric times till now. Although he was not as crafty as Nifa, who had the mastery over the laws of evilness, his intelligence was not lower than that of anyone in the room. No one would be able to employ the same tactic against the beast the second time, no matter how brilliant it might be. Doing so would only open up the grave that the beast had dug for him. From the start of the chase till now, it cost Nifa significantly despite the fact that he had the ability to escape from the flame dragon Lothar. His body was covered in deep wounds that exposed his bones. His tail was broken in half as well. When Nifa finally lost one side of his wings in an attempt to escape from the claws of the flame dragon, both Nifa and Lin Li knew that he had a slim chance of surviving Lothar's next attack. At this time, although the speed of Ragi's recitation increased, which signified the readiness of the spell, Eternal Forest, it was obvious that they already did not have enough time. Goddammit, I'm going in. The situation convinced Lin Li that he should not wait any longer. Rog was still working on the Eternal Forest. He would not have the time to send him back to Anril as planned. The flame dragon would get him before that. Lin Li knew that he had to fight for this last straw. He was not unhappy that Rog could not fulfill his promise. After all, it would be impossible to have perfect plans, no matter how comprehensive they were. Since he had chosen to stay, he would have to be accountable for his decision. When he saw that Nifa had lost his last bit of energy to escape from Lothar's attacks, Lin Li retrieved a sky blue-colored potion from his ring of endless storm. This life bottle was not any simple bottle. The fact that the bottle was carved with the dream crystal made it a prized treasure for any pharmacist. The life bottle would be able to purify any impurities within the potion, and thus enhance the effectiveness of the potion. The life bottle contained the all-knowing potion that was formulated with the Black Lotus when Lin Li was trying to look for the fire element herbs. In reality, this was not his first time creating or consuming the potion. When he was at the Scar of Death, in the Blackstone Mountains, it was the all-knowing potion that helped him to defeat the legendary Lich and his humorous Wyrm. It had even enabled him to have a sense of the legendary realm. Although Lin Li had had the ability of a pharmaceutics guru previously, it would have been impossible for him to formulate one bottle of all-knowing potion within a week. But now, as a legendary mage, at the peak of level 23, he had tremendous skills in creating potions, and great knowledge in the force of magic, as compared to before. As long as he had adequate ingredients, he would be able to create any master-level potion within a short time. Furthermore, this all-knowing potion was different from the one before. This was an improved version that included Lin Li's increased knowledge in pharmaceutics, as well as the enlightenment he gained from entering the legendary realm. In fact, Lin Li formulated the potion because he was bored, and he had excess Black Lotuses. Another reason was to prepare for his entering into the sanctuary realm. The effect of the all-knowing potion was to enhance the hidden potential and boost the ability of the mage who consumed it. This effect was not temporary. The mage would not return to his original level after that. Hence, this all-knowing potion was not only effective for low-level mages, but also powerhouses in the legendary realm. This was especially true for the potion contained in a life bottle. The longer it stayed in it, the better its effects. What was more important was the modifications Lin Li had done to the potion. He let the effects of the potion reach the guru level, but also made the effects of the potion extremely out of control. Hence, he hoped that the use of the life bottle could gradually alleviate its repercussions. However, if Lin Li were to consume this potion that had not been in the life bottle for too long, the effects of it might not reach the point that he hoped for. While the vigorous yet unstable energy would not threaten his life, it had the ability to prevent him from consuming any such potions in the future. However, Lin Li had no privilege to consider any other options, given the pressure of the current situation. If he could not even survive this, it would not matter if the all-knowing potion were to be contained in the life bottle for 1,000,000 years. He had decided to leave such matters for the future. What was important was to overcome the present crisis. With this in mind, Lin Li did not hesitate further. He took out the stopper of the bottle and emptied its contents into his mouth. As the cooling potion glided through his throat and into his stomach, Lin Li could feel a burning sensation in his body. His already massive mana started to rise like waves in a storm, as though it was capable of overturning an ocean. His prior powers, mastery of light and darkness, and his learning of the two powers from High Priest Rog were triggered by the all-knowing potion. They were like unstoppable tide that destroyed the dam. Lin Li's hair and sleeves moved despite the lack of wind. The violent wave of mana seemed to have its own life. It created a huge whirlpool around Lin Li's body. The scariest part was Lin Li's eyes, which flashed and alternated between their reflection of deep darkness and pure brightness. Although they returned to their original state within a second, they seemed to be clearer than before. It was as though he had the powers of seeing through everything in this world with extreme clarity. Rog, who was completing the eternal forest, suddenly felt a massive wave of mana erupt a distance away from him. He opened his eyes, expecting to see another formidable enemy. However, he could not help but got stunned by what he saw. Although he knew that Lin Li was not like any common man, he did not expect this mage to be like a different man in the blink of an eye. Rog was long aware that Lin Li was at the peak of level 23, and knew that his power could break through any time. But what Lin Li displayed was not as simple as a mere breakthrough to the next realm. Rog could feel with clarity that Lin Li's surging mana was still growing despite crossing the border into level 24. He could even sense the aura of a sanctuary realm powerhouse. But it was just that. Although Rog was surprised that Lin Li had a sudden boost in power, that did not change the gap between the two sides much. Being a level 28 beast, that flame dragon was like half of a divine. Even if Lin Li stepped into the sanctuary realm, he would not be able to help much as a man in level 24. Lin Li's actions afterwards stunned Rog further. It even distracted him from working on the eternal forest. Rog was filled with remorse as he watched Lin Li fly towards Lothar. He was remorseful that he had not sent this young mage back to Anril earlier. He could not bear to see such a talented person meet his downfall in such a place. Lin Li did not bother to say hi to Rog when he saw Nifa on the verge of death. He swerved towards the flame dragon like a lightning with his Helios scepter the moment he felt his mana stabilize a little. As he flew, Lin Li started to recite something really loudly. That was neither a spell in the lingua franca, nor the High Elves' language. It was the demonic runes that he learned from Conorus. Lin Li was hovering in mid-air. Every time he sang a syllable, an incredibly mysterious symbol would be spat from his mouth. It was as though the runes had turned corporeal. After every symbol appeared, it would change from small to large and from opaque to translucent rapidly. Then, it would vanish into the space. Neither Nifa, who had inherited the force of the dragon crystal, nor the knowledgeable high priest Rog knew what was on Lin Li's mind. Unlike them, however, that flame dragon, Lothar, treated Lin Li like a pest. He was only focused on his goal of killing the traitor of the ancient dragon species. However, when Lothar was about to give the little black dragon his last blow, the environment around him changed. The lush greenery in the eternal forest vanished, and it became pitch black. Despite having a ring of gold flames around his body, the glow emitted by Lothar was unable to light up the surroundings. He could only light up a radius of a dozen meters. Throne of Darkness. Nifa gasped in shock despite having resigned himself and waiting for death. The Throne of Darkness was a realm magic that the Dragon of Destruction created in the Abyss of Tharlan for his shadow clone. Although Nifa was aware that Lin Li had previously passed the test his brother Tutankhamun had set for him, so he had to have been to the Abyss of Tharlan, he did not expect that Lin Li had taken over the Throne of Darkness. Seems like this is Azarda's power. What a joke. Do you think that this is sufficient to defeat me? Lothar said in great disdain after he realized the aura that emitted from the Throne of Darkness belonged to the Dragon of Destruction. He was not wrong. Not to mention that the Throne of Darkness was a mere shadow clone's power. Even if it was a real Dragon of Destruction, it would not have the ability to defeat him. The Throne of Darkness was just the first step. Lin Li did not stop after he summoned the Throne of Darkness. He continued to recite another phrase of demonic runes. As Lin Li recited the second segment of the demonic runes, the flame dragon finally sensed that something was amiss. He felt a wave of force from the endless abyss surging towards him like a tide. What followed was an immense pressure on its power base. The second phrase of demonic runes was what Li Lin learnt from Conorus when he was trying to deal with the Lord of Darkness. It was a demonic rune set that made use of the force of endless abyss. If not for that massive power, it would have been impossible for Lin Li to defeat the Lord of Darkness then. Although this was not the endless abyss, the space here was incredibly weak. Otherwise, the fire elemental world would not have overlapped here. Lin Li's motive behind summoning the Throne of Darkness was not to use its force to suppress the flame dragon. He knew that it would be impractical to do that. Instead, the Throne of Darkness served like a portal for the fire elemental world. It was as good as creating a partial overlap between the Abyss of Tharlan and the current space. The space covered by the Throne of Darkness was the overlap between this world and the Abyss of Tharlan. Of course, that did not mean that Lin Li had gained the upper hand. The flame dragon was not the Lord of Darkness, and this was not the real endless abyss. It was definitely impossible for Lin Li to use the abyssal force to put down Lothar even if it was the real endless abyss. Lin Li did not have enough ability to activate the force of abyss like before. He did not even have an idea whether he would be able to hold the flame dragon back for 1 or 2 seconds. Lin Li's strategy was inspired by his enlightenment from Balak's crystal. In the prehistoric times, the Lord of Disaster, Balak, had used this method to deal with his enemies. He used his domain to borrow the force of abyss, to defeat the Zago demons as they were unable to leave the abyss. Unfortunately, Lin Li only had Balak's memory, and not his abilities.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.